I like the important statement you made, Winston, which we've discussed in other meetings, and we can't bring it all here, about the misalignment between the real economy and the financial sector. We have about $250 trillion in global financial assets, and probably less than 20% of it is really serving the real economy, and that's a generous figure. But actually, our topic today is even broader than that, because we're looking at the misalignment between economy and society. So the problem within the economy is a subset of a bigger issue, and you've flagged a very serious problem that is destabilizing our global economy and preventing us from utilizing the productive capacities of humanity, which itself is a subset of the bigger question which we started with, and that was, how are we going to meet these pressing global challenges? Or in Tibor's terms, he always puts it with greater power than I do, these imminent planetary, I know I got the order wrong, but existential planetary imminent crises. So Zbig started out by talking about money as a great invention, as an economic tool. And I think our wider topic is money as a social invention. Money not only in its role in making economy successful, and Zbig's gone through, and Chandru mentioned also, but its wider role in this complex role that it has in the governance of the society as a whole. So I'd like to bring back, and all the speakers have touched on it, I'm just trying to bring it back for emphasis, that how do we look at money and understand its contribution to addressing the global social challenges that we have today? And then it's not just a question of that money allows the interconvertibility of economic goods and services, but money actually allows the interconvertibility of all social goods, of all social capacities and powers. So what I'm going to say, I don't think I'm going to say something new here, but I thought it might be helpful just to put them to categorize them. I think we could roughly say that money has three levels of power. We all know it's very powerful. It's almost a mystique. And I think because money's power is not limited to economy, it's important that we don't regard it only as a subject for economists. And for too long, that's been the mistake, I think, of social science. There are exceptions, but largely it's been the idea that money is something that's dealt with only by the economist. But the society as a whole depends on the way our money system works. And therefore, in my view, it's the purview of all social science. It has a specialized economic function, but it has a much wider social function. So Zbig and Chandru spoke about what the primary economic power of money, which is for exchange, and as a catalyst for exchange. I like what Zbig said. Not only does money help facilitate exchange, it also encourages production. Because if you have something more than you can consume, the surplus, it not only enables you to use the surplus, it encourages you to create more surplus. So that's at the economic level. And both, at least, or all of the other speakers have mentioned the fact that money is not just a thing, but money's power arises from the fact that it's a symbol. And I found this a long time a hard thing to grasp. What is the power that money gets because it's a symbol, as opposed to the power that it gets because it actually is good for exchanging things? Chandrasekaran mentioned the fact that money enables us to transferability in space, because it's much more portable, and today it's instantly and infinitely portable. But it also enables us to transfer in time, because it's not perishable. We can take money, our goods are converted into savings and expend it over long periods of time. We can invest in the long term. So it gives this power it gives a tremendous boost. It also, because it is only a symbol, it enables us to do what has been spoken already, but I find it somewhat of a mystery. It enables us to take our trust and monetize it. If you trust somebody, you can do something of some nature. You can give them some power or privilege on the understanding that they're going to give it back in some form in the future. And that's actually how the first credit money was created, as an IOU, a promissory note, a letter of credit, or in some form or other. But what we're really doing here is saying it's not the goods get back the money, it's trust. And therefore the question is, how much trust in society has been converted into money? How much trust can we put into money? How much money can we really create? And of course, this was the basis for the creation of the nation state. It's interesting because I wish I could remember where I read it, but in one of the histories of the Roman Empire, the author attributed the fact that the Roman Empire collapsed was really due to the fact that they didn't know about public debt. They didn't know they could monetize the public faith in them and use it later. And it was really in Britain in about the 15th, 16th century where they really started monetarizing public debt, because next year's taxation they created as money this year. And they started using that money for trade, because everybody knew next year they're going to get more tax, which is really creating something that out of something that doesn't exist today. And the third power is convertibility, but here we're talking about not just the economic convertibility, but in the wider sense that all the speakers have touched on is money can be converted into any other form of social power. And if you remember the list I put up the first morning, it can be converted into transportation. If you've got money, you can transport anything anywhere, even maybe soon due to Elon Musk to Mars even. If you've got money, you can communicate anywhere. You can get education, as was mentioned. As Winston was emphasizing, you can convert it into political power of all descriptions. Of virtually every. So money is interconvertible in the sense that any capacity the society has, and if there are limits to it, they're very minimum at the level of society. I don't say you can convert it into happiness, or you can make it into goodness, or you can make it into virtue, or even intelligence, but the things that society does, rather than the things that are human well-being, it may not be fully convertible. But the things that society possesses, it's virtually convertible. And that comes back to the point which all the speakers have raised, is that fundamentally, what is the foundation on which money is based? It used to be based on the commodities that were exchanged. It used to be based on precious metals and commodities. Then, as Chandrasekaran said, it was based on institutions of the credibility of the bank that issued the banknotes. At one time in the U.S., we had 6,000 banks issuing banknotes. There were 6,000 different currencies in circulation, and that actually only stopped in the 20th century. It used to be based on a gold standard, but it's very interesting, though there was a time, a very early time, when money was convertible into gold. At the height of the gold standard 120 years ago, less than 5% of the money in circulation in Great Britain, which was the the center of the gold standard was actually backed by gold. The gold was only used for balancing trade between countries. It was not exchangeable. The U.S. The U.S. Federal Reserve notes say this money can be converted into. It never. You cannot, as an American citizen, you could never, as an American citizen, go to the Federal Reserve and hand in your $100 bill and get $100 worth of gold for it. There wasn't enough gold to do it. So what is it fundamentally backed by? It was backed by, as somebody or several said, trust in the government that issues it, but more than that, was backed by the productive potential of the society. Not only the existing productive potential, but the future productive potential. And if you have any doubt about that, look what happened to the value of the sterling after it voted. It didn't leave EU yet. It simply voted that it's going to leave, and the sterling has fallen by about 17% since then. What happened to that money? The international financial crisis, we lost trillions of dollars in a month or something. The economy of the world didn't change during that time, but our perception of the future, our uncertainty and perception of the future. So I turn it around and ask, are we really monetarizing our trust in the future of humanity and the potentials of global society? Or are we, I think we're monetarizing a very small portion of that. And the reasons for that, it would be very important to discuss. But if we talk about creating money, we have to think, are we just printing something that has no value? Or are we finding a way to give monetary expression to a potential that's not there? When I was in university in the 60s, it was very difficult to get a student loan. After all, students don't have assets, they don't have credit, and getting loans, you could get scholarships, but getting loans today, all over the world, in fact, today, student loans in the U.S. are the single largest category of loans, more than the rest of consumer credit, more than $1 trillion. Based on what? The students don't have any assets. Based on the future it's an investment in the future earning capacity of the human capital. So we are already leveraging the untapped future potential in some areas, but certainly I would argue in a very limited extent. The factors determining the value of money, many of them are mentioned, so excuse me if I'm going quickly, I just want to kind of make it comprehensive. The availability of goods and services, obviously, if you don't have goods and services available, we won't take the currency because we don't know what to do with it. Peaceful climate. The moment we have war or a threat of war, the value of the currencies in that area lose value because we know it will impede exchange. Human relations. It was, I think, Chandrasekaran brought out very nicely, the capacity for collaboration and exchange between people, and so forth. Specialization of function, the public acceptance of money, our capacity to communicate and for transportation, our trust in people and institutions, our trust in society, our confidence in the future. But beyond all of that, the point I wanted to make was, the value of money that we have is based on the value we give to human beings. And if you want to check it, see the societies that give the greatest value to human beings. I don't mean in intangible psychological ways. I mean by law, by the rights of the human beings, by the dignity accorded to the human beings. And you'll see those are the currencies that have the highest value. Because ultimately it's going to depend on the capacity of each person to contribute So Winston has covered, and this is a topic we're going to come back to. We're going to talk about strategies for the redistribution of power, but Emil and Winston have already pointed out, and there are many very good articles in The Economist that point out, which was surprising to me, of how the economic system is skewed by the political system in which it operates. And Economist has written a lot about the fact that our international intellectual property rights are not fixed by law to support the freest development of the economy. They're fixed by law to protect intellectual property of corporations, especially driven by the U.S., by the IT industry and the entertainment industry, to protect their property. Pharmaceutical, to protect their property long into the future, way beyond the original intention was to encourage innovation. Actually, it discourages innovation, because if you've got long property rights, you don't need to innovate. You can simply keep cashing in on it. In the meeting we had in Lisbon in May, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, who was our keynote speaker, he spoke about power, and he said, as foreign minister, he's a sociologist, he says, as foreign minister, his number one responsibility is to go to the EU and negotiate economic policy, which is really determined not by any economic principles, but determined by the power of the governments that are involved in the transaction. So I think it's really important for us to all recognize the way economy works is not according to some model or pure abstract theory. It depends on how the economy relates to the rest of the society, how the political environment it's in, the social environment within which it's in, the level of education and human rights, the legal environment with which it's in, and therefore we have to look at it in its entirety.